Everyone, thank you so much for joining me tonight. It was a very gray and cloudy day here today. It was heavily rainy. We ended up going to a bookstore, which was awesome as we kick off our holiday shopping. I have a lot to do still, and we're going to be out of town for America Fest over December 17th through 20th, I believe. So if you guys are in the Phoenix area, you should 100% stop by America Fest and meet everybody. Josh Hawley's going to be there. Charlie Kirk's going to be there. I'm going to be there. Tim's going to be there. Lots of other awesome people are going to be there to hang out. And I am stoked to meet all these people in real life, especially people like Josh Hawley, whom I admire and I've never had an opportunity to meet. I did get to meet some super awesome people working on Timcast IRL, and I appreciate that for sure, but my bingo card is lacking and I need to fill it up. So I'm really excited about America Fest. And then in January, we're going to be going somewhere warm and sunny, so I'm very excited about that too. But I would really like to get down to Florida at some point, if only to scoop up all the freezing lizards off the ground. I've heard that once it hits a certain temperature in Florida, the lizards start to fall out of the trees, which sounds delightful to me. So hopefully that's something we can work into our future plans for sure. I kicked this off a couple minutes early because I wanted to open my waiting room and see if anybody would like to join me for a couple minutes talking about nothing nonsense. So tonight's topic is really kind of interesting. This is just something that I saw from Fox News, and I have a thread from the super famous now, Matt Taibbi, talking about some more Twitter files being dropped, and we're going to examine what Jack Dorsey has to say when it comes to Elon Musk, and it is probably not what you expect. So I'm really looking forward to unpacking this. I don't know who James Baker is, so we're going to find out together. All I know is that he was a lawyer at Twitter, and he also worked for the government. He was a Republican, which is fascinating, which just goes to show you that you cannot rely on any one party ever, pretty much, and you need to be very careful. What's that old saying? Keep your friends close and your enemies closer. Yeah, you need to keep a close eye on both of them because they are not on your side. You should be a tribe of one as far as I'm concerned. That's why my Twitter profile says not tribal, because I'm definitely not. And I appreciate the conservative movement, but we are all allowed to hold our own views, which I think is an awesome part about conservatism. And none should be taken advantage of or discarded. All should be equally considered. But conservatism allows that unique individualism that you do not often see on the left. However, the left is much better at performing tribal functions like mobbing and flagging and canceling and all that stuff. So to their credit, that gets a lot done in today's day and age, especially with social media. So let's dive right into this first thread from Matt Taibbi. This goes something like this. Thread, Twitter files supplemental. This is from the 6th, so this is from yesterday. I didn't get into it because I promised I would go over the Respect for Marriage Act. It is not what it says it is. You guys should check out that video. And also, the Making the Argument with Nick Freitas comes out tomorrow, where we unpack it much more thoroughly than where I did. All right, so Matt Taibbi says, on Friday, the first installment of the Twitter files was published here. We expected to publish more over the weekend. Many wondered why there was a delay. We can now tell you part of the reason why. On Tuesday, Twitter Deputy General Counsel and former FBI General Counsel, Republican, Jim Baker, was fired. Among the reasons, vetting the first batch of Twitter files without knowledge of new management. Fascinating. The process for producing the Twitter files involved delivery to two journalists, Barry Weiss and me, Matt Taibbi, via a lawyer close to new management. That would be Elon Musk. However, after the initial batch, things became complicated, as they often do with lawyers. Over the weekend, while we both dealt with obstacles to new searches, it was Barry Weiss who discovered that the person in charge of releasing the files was someone named Jim. When she called to ask Jim's last name, the answer came back, Jim Baker. My jaw hit the floor, said Weiss. The first batch of files both reporters received was marked Spectra Baker emails. Baker is a controversial figure. He's been something of a Zelig of FBI controversies dating back to 2016. I have no idea who Zelig is. From the Steele dossier to the Alpha server mess. Yeah, I have a Fox article about his involvement with the Steele dossier in 2019. He resigned in 2018 after an investigation into leaks to the press. The news that Baker was reviewing the Twitter files surprised everyone involved, to say the least. New Twitter chief Elon Musk acted quickly to exit Baker on Tuesday. Reporters resumed searches through Twitter files material, a lot of it, today. The next installment of the Twitter files will appear on Barry Weiss's. Okay, so Barry Weiss, I think, will be releasing the next stack of files. Stay tuned, says Matt. Interesting. So let's read this Fox News article, because I know last time I was reading from BuzzFeed and Reddit. Today we're going to be looking at Fox News because we like to keep our sources diverse. Twitter files. Jack Dorsey urges Elon Musk after James Baker ouster. Just release everything without filter. If the goal is transparency to build trust, why not just release everything without filter and let people judge for themselves? Former Twitter boss Jack Dorsey asks. Not surprisingly, on Twitter. Ex-Twitter boss Jack Dorsey has called on current CEO Elon Musk to make all of the Twitter files public after the company's former deputy general counsel James Baker was exited from his role in the suppression of the Hunter Biden laptop story. Musk has teased the release of additional Twitter files that purport to show how the company worked to censor certain speech, as many conservatives have long asserted. Dorsey on Wednesday suggested that Musk release all the internal documents at once without filter, and also explained the actions Twitter will take under its new management. If the goal is transparency to build trust, why not just release everything without filter and let people judge for themselves, including all discussions around current and future actions? Make everything public now. Wow, this is a very interesting take from Jack. What do you guys think? I'm throwing this to you guys in the chat. This is a fascinating development. This is certainly not something I ever thought I would see happen. My husband, Andy, as you guys probably well know, really does not like Jack Dorsey. I don't much care for him either. But to me, this definitely sounds like there was a lot going on at Twitter that he simply did not know about. And I think this is his attempt at redemption, possibly. Tell me what you guys think. Dorsey's comment comes after Musk handed off internal documents and records to Substack journalist Matt Taibbi, who published a thread exposing how previous Twitter leadership decided to throttle discussion of the New York Post's bombshell story detailing the contents of Hunter Biden's laptop. At the time, Twitter safety alleged the articles were in violation of its hacked materials policy. Interesting. Jack Dorsey, hipster Rasputin, as you can see here with his tie-dye shirt. At least Elon Musk has a better haircut. The Twitter files reveal that Baker, who was a former general counsel at the FBI and a key figure in the Trump-Russia investigation, more on that later, advised Twitter executives to proceed with the assumption the New York Post broke Twitter rules, even though there was no evidence they had done so. Oh my gosh, excuse me, I'm so sleepy this evening. I support the conclusion that we need more facts to assess whether the materials were hacked, he wrote in one email chain. At this stage, however, it's reasonable for us to assume that they may have been, and that caution is warranted. Baker was responding to a Twitter executive who was wondering whether they could truthfully claim that the laptop story was, quote, part of the policy. Taibbi reported that Baker was also in charge of reviewing the Twitter files before they were released to journalists, which surprised everyone involved. Musk on Tuesday said Baker was exited from the company in light of concerns about Baker's possible role in the suppression of information important to the public dialogue. That's such a nice way of putting the Hunter Biden story, the Hunter Biden laptop story for sure. This is so interesting, and I have to say before we move to the next article, it's fascinating to me to watch this happen on Twitter, because Twitter is 100% making history right now. I feel like this is something that will be remembered for a long time moving forward. And this is not something that our grandparents and likely even our parents could have ever even imagined as far as like a way of communicating directly to people in power. I've always said this about Twitter. I've always thought it's such a wonderful way to reach out to somebody in a high level of authority and just tell them what you think. I've always found that incredibly valuable. I think that's probably the biggest, most important thing that Twitter does for people. It puts everyone on the same playing field when it comes to yelling at the people in charge of them. And I think that's wonderful. As far as free speech goes, I think that's the ultimate manifestation of free speech as far as we know. I mean, we might find something even cooler next year, next 10 years. Yeah, so Elon tweeted, "Tune in for episode 2 of the Twitter Files tomorrow." He said that on December 2nd. They weren't released until the 6th. And he says, "Looks like we'll need another day or so." And then Jack jumps in, "If the goal is transparency to build trust, why not just release everything without filter, let people judge themselves? Hashtag Twitter Files." Interesting. And people are commenting silly enough. They're talking about how the goal isn't transparency. It's for the filter to exist. It's a giant nothing burger without the filter. I'm not sure what they mean by that. Because that's hardly the goal. He's trying to save his $44 billion. Who cares about free speech anyway? This whole Twitter Files nonsense is a dog bone thrown for the conservatives. That, I think, is a very wrong take, but who am I to judge? Elon Musk is a pathological liar. Oh, interesting, fascinating, and a supervillain. I have nothing against him. This is enough to dismiss your opinion totally. Yeah, that's fair. People have become so polarized over Elon Musk, and these progressives are the ones who, like 2 years ago, were talking about how absolutely incredible Elon Musk was because he made such cool electric vehicles. It's crazy to me how quickly things change, and I'm so glad that he's willing to stand in the face of all these people who are just out to get him and absolutely despise him now and are out to ruin him. I'm sure you guys have seen there's an investigation into the treatment of animals as far as his Neuralink testing. This was an investigation that was started before he bought Twitter because it turns out that testing Neuralink on monkeys is very, very hard on them, resulting in a lot of their deaths. And I would like to highlight the fact that animal testing is a horrible necessity of human science research. And I would also like to point out that Anthony Fauci was absolutely awful about this too, and that was 100% swept on the rug by the mainstream media. No one ever talked about it because Anthony Fauci wasn't doing incredibly great things for the human condition. He wasn't fighting for free speech, and they had no reason to dislike him. He was 100% their darling and their lapdog, which is just goes to show you how biased the media is. They control what you even see in the first place. So let's read this second article about Jim Baker being fired, and we'll read a little bit more about Jim Baker as a person. Twitter is ablaze as Elon Musk fires lawyer involved in suppressing laptop story and Russian collusion hoax. Senator Josh Hawley suggested the GOP should invite James Baker to testify about an attempt to coerce Twitter into election interference. This is why I appreciate Josh Hawley, and I'm looking forward to hopefully meeting him in Phoenix in a couple weeks. Twitter ignited upon the news Tuesday that CEO Elon Musk booted former FBI General Counsel James Baker from the company for suppression of information. Journalist Matt Taibbi, who revealed the Twitter Files on Friday, shared an article about the now ousted Twitter Deputy General Counsel Baker's connections to FBI controversies involving the Trump-Russia probe. The article from the New York Post, opinion writer Jonathan Turley, said that Baker was at the center of the Twitter suppression scandal. Turley also observed Baker has been featured repeatedly in the Russian investigations launched by the Justice Department, including the hoax involving the Russian Alpha Bank. I'm not familiar with the Alpha Bank scandal. We should look into that at a later date. Musk responded to Taibbi's tweet of the article announcing that Baker had been removed from the company entirely. In light of our concerns about Baker's possible role in suppression of information important to the public dialogue, he was exited from Twitter today. This we know. We went over this earlier. Very cool. Jonathan Turley is also another wonderful reporter. I know there's not many neutral reporters, people who are truly committed to bipartisan coverage of what actually happens out there. We have Batya Angar Sargon. We have people like Crystal Ball and Sagar Enjeti, although he would definitely tell you he is conservative. We have Matt Taibbi, we have Glenn Greenwald, and we have Jonathan Turley. He's awesome. John Solomon is another really good one. So there are few good sources still out there. And I really recommend you guys follow them on Twitter. I'm assuming that most of you guys in my chat and who watch these videos are fully immersed in the Twitter landscape, hellscape, some call it. I don't. Twitter is 100% what you make it. You can mute people, you can block people. It's very customizable. You can make it so that you only see certain things. There's a thing called Black Twitter. There's like cryptocurrency Twitter, which I would never dare enter. The corner of Twitter I follow tends to be like just news, journalistic stuff, breaking news, big stories, and stuff that I want to talk about on these videos, stuff like that. All right, let's continue. That was a little bit of an aside. Among the documents revealed in Friday's Twitter files was a message from Baker during a discussion about suppressing the New York Post laptop stories, saying, "I support the conclusion we need more facts to assert whether the materials were hacked." Saying it's reasonable for us to assume, this is such lawyer speak, it is reasonable for us to assume that they may have been and that caution is warranted. The revelation of his firing set Twitter ablaze with praise for Musk's leadership and condemnations for Baker's career history. Australian commentator Rita Panahi tweeted a summary of the shakeup. Baker is the former FBI general counsel who was knee-deep in a Russian collusion hoax and instrumental in suppressing New York Post bombshell stories on contents of Hunter Biden's laptop, this we know. Editor-in-chief of The Federalist, Molly Hemingway, also another awesome journalist, along with her husband, Mark, tweeted James Baker, implicated in the Russia collusion hoax, so damaged the country, is now gone from Twitter. So I just have to stop and say the fact that this person worked for Twitter and that Twitter was such a drag on the public discourse for so long is in no way surprising. In fact, this is simply a puzzle piece to help unravel why exactly Twitter got so toxic so fast and why so many conservatives were banned and they pushed crazy conspiracies like the Russian collusion hoax and all of this stuff. Senator Josh Hawley, Republican from Missouri, proposed that while Baker may have been fired from Twitter, he's welcome to testify before lawmakers. Honestly, good for him. Great idea. I love Josh. He seems to be doing stuff. Representative James Comer, a Republican from Kentucky, made a similar proposal. Elon Musk, can you make sure to forward our email inviting James Baker to a GOP oversight hearing next year? We sent it to his Twitter email. That's actually really clever. Some users noted this was part of a larger trend of Musk removing the old guard from Twitter leadership. So, as far as I'm concerned, I think I've told you guys this, but I think that Elon Musk is to Twitter what Trump was to the US, except that Elon is actually clearing out the permanent state, the deep state that Trump was battling against. I think that probably the biggest thing that he has done thus far is essentially what Trump would have been best off doing. Somebody in chat just asked me why I don't interact with chat. While I'm speaking, it's because I'm very easily distractible and lose my chain of thought very quickly. So I will interact with you guys shortly. Hang in there. PJ Media columnist Ryan Ladendecker wrote, "Now that's leadership, baby. Boom." Commentator Ian Miles Chong tweeted, "Cleaning house. There should be no space for those who seek to undermine Twitter's role in the dissemination of truth over establishment narratives." Some Twitter users painted a far less optimistic view of the changing leadership. Of course they did. Oh my gosh. Great. Okay, here we go. Putinists are really getting their day at Twitter. Lawyer and writer David R. Lurie wrote, "Important to keep in mind that Musk is likely focused on coming up with a make-weight arguments for denying change of control related compensation to senior personnel, blah, blah, blah." Oh my gosh. I lost a few brain cells there. Bear with me. Music producer and investor Leonidas Rossini slammed Musk as a political opportunist. "Not sure what exactly you are trying to achieve with these 2-year-old stories. Are you that desperate for engagement? Or are you trying to win friends with the Republicans? Either way, you can't run for president." Yeah, we know. Calm down. First of all, you have to know that Jim Baker is a Republican. This is not about party lines. This is about discovering the truth. And this is something that I genuinely love. I love when you look at something and you can see which direction the truth lies and you don't care anymore about party lines and you're just focused on what actually happened. And I think this is the reason that I really wanted to go into journalism when I was a little kid. When I was about 11 years old, I realized that there was nowhere that I could go in journalism, that I would never fit in, that I was far too conservative. I leaned way too right. I cared too much about, the right to life and stuff like that. And I would never be considered an actual journalist as long as I held these views. I was shockingly prescient. I was only 11 years old. Yes, Jack is in Dorsey to respond to one of my chat comments. Jack Dorsey recommended that Elon Musk drop all of it. Anyway, when I was 11, I realized that I wouldn't be able to get anywhere in journalism because in the pursuit of truth, there is no room for partisanship because the truth often does not lie in any one party. It's a little, I'm going to pull a Kamala Harris here. It's a little bit like a Venn diagram. You guys know how much I love Venn diagrams with school buses in them and more Venn diagrams on the other side. I digress. But there's something important to remember in the pursuit of truth, which is something that all journalists should be pushing for. I personally think that all journalists should be like 99% bipartisan. And I think I would attempt to do that because Republicans don't uphold the views that I do and neither do Democrats. So where does that put me? I don't agree with either of them. Neither one of them are doing enough in any regard as far as I'm concerned. I wish that more journalists would be like, for example, Matt Taibbi. I trust that his intentions are in good faith. I don't believe he's done anything terribly heinous, although they will accuse him of everything under the sun. But because of the hyperbole that exists on Twitter and social media in general, I don't put any stock at all in any of that stuff. Let's do a quick rundown of who exactly James Baker was and why he got in trouble back in 2019, even though he quit in 2018. Former top FBI lawyer James Baker is subject of criminal media leak probe. Transcript reveals. Now, Catherine Herridge is another wonderful journalist. She's actually been covering a lot of this, and people have been yelling at her, telling her that she's been too late. She's only covered what's been available recently, and she has been, as far as I can tell, fully consistent and as close to bipartisan as is possible to be. I don't think she just works with Fox News either. I think she has byline in a bunch of different organizations, bipartisan as such. The former top lawyer at the FBI has been under federal investigation for leaking to the media, a letter from House Republicans revealed Tuesday. The letter from GOP reps Jim Jordan and Mark Meadows cited the transcript of a congressional interview with former General Counsel James Baker as his lawyer last fall, where the probe conducted by seasoned U.S. Attorney John Durham was confirmed. Okay, this is part of the Durham report. You may or may not know, Baker has been the subject of a leak investigation, a criminal leak investigation that's still active at the Justice Department, lawyer Daniel Levin told lawmakers as he pushed back on questions about his client's conversations with reporters. Jordan and Meadows' letter was sent to Durham, the U.S. Attorney for Connecticut, and requested additional information about the probe later this month. As we continue our oversight and investigation work, we felt it prudent to write to you seeking an update. Without being apprised of the contours of your leak investigation and Baker's role, we run the risk of inadvertently interfering with your prosecutorial plans, they wrote. That's some nice writing, and I approve. A source familiar with the U.S. Attorney investigation told Fox News they believe the investigation of Baker remains open, adding that they understand it began during the Obama administration and not in the course of the Russia investigation. So, from what I'm gathering from this article, Jim Baker has a very long and storied history of being an absolute leaker. And I'm not at all surprised that he threw a wrench in Elon Musk's plans to actually bring this stuff to light, because his MO is not to bring things to light forthrightly, it's to leak them under the radar and probably gain some kind of advantage by doing it that way. The transcript of the closed-door interview and the letter do not include details explaining why the investigation is being led out of the Connecticut office. The status of the investigation is not publicly known, but the disclosure marks the latest confirmation of a leak investigation involving FBI figures who have since left the Bureau. Last year, former FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe saw his leak case referred to the U.S. Attorney in Washington, D.C. McCabe was fired for lying to federal investigators about his role in a media leak regarding the Clinton Foundation on the eve of the 2016 presidential election. That is a storied history of being an absolute leaker, and that just makes me mad. It doesn't surprise me, but it does make me mad. The FBI did not comment. Durham has held various positions in the District of Connecticut for 35 years. Okay, I don't care about a history of Durham. Whatever. Durham, okay. Oh, he's a seasoned prosecutor. Fascinating. Okay, none of this matters. What we can gather from this is that Jim Baker, has a really full history of leakage, and I would advise you guys to keep a close eye on Bari Weiss's Twitter. Let me see what her Twitter is. I think it's B Weiss, or might be Bari Weiss. Let's double check here. Yeah, Bari Weiss, BARIWEISS. You may have your gripes with her. She's not a perfect journalist. She went on Joe Rogan and said some very silly things. If I recall correctly, I might not. I have a very shaky memory. But I think that we need to... I'm going to say something really controversial here. I kind of agree with Kanye, and I will explain myself very thoroughly because that warrants a lot of explanation. I genuinely think that every person, no matter what their background, no matter what their story is, has some truth that they bring to the table, whether they realize it or not. Your job as a listener is to figure out exactly where that truth is and how it ties into the broader scope of what you're going for. Like, I think that Even someone who's evil, even someone who is outright disparaging of others, someone who's disgusting, has some truth to show you. And sometimes one of the things I noticed when I was growing up was that I learned a lot more from a bad example than from a good example. And that actually makes me feel a lot better about my position in life, because I say people can look at me and they can use me as a good example, hopefully, or they can use me as a bad example. Either way, I feel like I'm making the world better. I'm bringing a little bit more truth to people's lives. They can see my experience and be like, oh, wow, that's crazy. I see what happened there. I don't want that to happen to me, so I'm going to do this, this, and this instead of what she did, because that wasn't a great call. But I do like the idea of being an example, and I love the idea of bringing some kernel of truth into people's lives, whether intentionally or unintentionally. And that's why I agree with Kanye. It's because I'm constantly looking for ways to scoop up a little bit of good from everyone. Disparate, crazy thinkers, people I have nothing in common with. I haven't fully scrutinized, for example, Hitler's thinking, because it's very commonly understood that his actions were incredibly heinous. Not as bad as like Chairman Mao or Joseph Stalin, but for whatever reason, we equate Hitler with just absolutely satanic motions. And I think that, as a little bit of a tangent, I will say that I think Kanye West is simply attempting to be as hyperbolic as possible. I don't know if you guys remember when he put on the MAGA hat. That was the most edgy thing he could do then. He ripped the microphone away from Taylor Swift. She was one of the most popular women in the world. That was the most edgy thing he could have done then. He said George W. Bush doesn't care about black people. That was edgy. What else did he do? He's done a bunch of really edgy things. He did say he was pro-life, but I am inclined to believe that's coming more from a position of an actual real life experience, and I appreciate that from him. But I think that the truth of what he was saying was that every single person you can learn from. And I will never be in the position that he put himself in, where he was giving props to these ridiculously heinous dictators. I will never go that far. And I actually really liked, I don't know if you guys saw this, but Alex Jones came back and he was ranting about how he loves America. He hates communism. He wants the freedoms that we originally had back. He doesn't like, Chairman Mao. He doesn't like Joseph Stalin. He doesn't like Hitler. He doesn't like Xi. He doesn't like any of this totalitarianism. He wants to get it back to the way it was, closer to the 1700s. And I respected him for that, because Alex Jones has always struck me as someone who he strikes me as someone for whom it would be very difficult to lie. And that's something I really respect in someone. I feel like I have such an opportunity to fully trust someone who doesn't seem like they're going to be. I do consider myself a good judge of character. This has paid off well for me. But I will say I like people who don't seem like they would ever lie, whether because they're too forgetful or because they're just simple and straightforward. I love that in a person. I've always liked that about Alex Jones. I'll leave that there for sure. I know it's a spicy topic. Somebody says, good Lord, I don't know what that's about. You're welcome to gather what you like from my 2 cents about Kanye. I know it's kind of intriguing, but I think that he's onto something there. And I don't know about you guys, but probably most of you guys haven't heard of this, and this is where I'm going to wrap because I've gotten a little off topic here, but I really, really like the wisdom that is in a little poem. It's actually a piece of prose that's written in a kind of poetic way, and it's called the Desiderata, and it's by a gentleman named Max Ehrman. And it talks about how you need to listen to everyone, no matter how dull or, like backwards their story is, because everybody has their own story, and you have an obligation as a citizen of reality to listen to them and to try to learn from them. And I remember that demotivational poster. I don't know if you guys remember demotivational posters. I actually really want one to put up on the wall in here, and it's going to be the one about being a bad example, because I think that's just perfect. And I don't think they realized how close they were to the truth, because it's like, I think that a bad example tends to stick in your mind. You know how we're drawn towards like the crazy stuff? Like, this is why we have anxiety, is because we're always on the lookout for danger, and we're always being careful about what might attack us next. So it makes sense to me that being a bad example would have a greater impact on people than a good example. So that's just something to keep in mind if you're going through a rough patch or if you have a history of being a bad example or what have you. It is what it is, and you can be just as much of a positive impact in the world as you might be if you only gave good examples. But speaking of good examples, I think that Jack Dorsey did the right thing in asking for these files to be released. We will see if Elon Musk thinks it's in the best interest of Twitter to release them all at once. It seems like he has a definite strategy for releasing these kind of slowly. Very intrigued to see what happens with that. I will attempt to keep you guys, apprised of all that stuff and make sure you are up to date with the Twitter drama because it actually is very important. And despite what the Democrats say, it is truly important for democracy or our current method of government and for our cultural conversation for sure. But until something interesting happens with Twitter again, I will see you next time. Until then, bye guys.